Okay, we are going to talk about the immigration today, and we're going to talk about Moab and Ammon and who they are in Scripture and who they are today. And it's really easy to see it. It's really easy to see it. And they're not the only immigrants that come in here, but we want to specifically talk about them. Okay. I want to start by just giving you your history. You know that the Moabites were the descendants of Lot, and you know the story about how Lot got out of Sodom and went. His two daughters had children. We'll cut to the chase on that. They had children, and the children were Ammon and Moab. Okay, so we know that story. We know that they would be kinsmen to Israel. They would be kinsmen to Israel. And so we want to go through their history. They lived in the Middle East. They really lived on the east side of Israel, but they got pushed out of that area. All of those people got pushed out of that area. When Joshua came in, he pushed a lot of them out, but they'd already been pushed out previously by other kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar, he conquered Moab in 582 BC, and then it says they just kind of vanished. But then they reappeared and moved into North Africa. So we've been told that we believe that they moved into North Africa, and they become the people we call the Moors today. And the Moors, that's Moors. And they were talked about in history because they were the ones that came in. They came into from North Africa into Spain in 711 and defeated the Visigoths. Now, if y'all remember the story, you know that the Visigoths were the people that went in and took down Rome. That was Israel. These people migrated into Western Europe, and the Ostrogoths were in the area of Italy, and the Visigoths were in Spain. Okay, and so when the Moors came in around the 7th century, really, and around the 8th century time frame, when they pushed themselves in, they pushed the people that were the Visigoths up. Okay, so as we were saying, that Nebuchadnezzar pushed out the Moabite, and they established themselves basically in the lower part of Spain and in Portugal. And I kind of think that that Moab was in Spain, and that the people in Portugal was Ammon. They were two brothers. They stayed together, and they kind of were situated themselves near Israel all the time. They were always near Israel. And there's a lot of people today in Mexico that we know are the descendants of these people, and we're going to talk about that next. So in 1492, we know that Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand were pushing in Christianity at the time of Columbus going to America. So that's when this great Inquisition came down. They were the part of the Habsburg dynasty, and they were pushing in the Catholic faith. So people either had to convert or they had to leave. And you remember that many of the Jews that were in that area moved up into Amsterdam, into the area of Amsterdam. And some of them, a king in Poland allowed that to open up so so that they took in some from Poland. So you know the story about the Jews, but most people don't realize that the Muslims were there, and they were in the lower part of Spain and lower part of Portugal. And those people, they had to convert to Christianity too or leave. And we believe in history that many of them left and went to South America. I'm going to show you that history. Now, it says here, this marked the end of the Moorish rule because the fall of Granada. That was a battle. And they had to either convert to the Catholic faith, or they had to be exiled. And that was the rule at that time. And that was one of the reasons why Columbus came over when he did, which is really interesting, because he sailed for who? Somebody tell me who he sailed for. He was from Portugal. And he sailed for Spain, yes. He sailed for Isabella and King Ferdinand. But he was from Portugal, which is really interesting because he could have been either a Moabite, or he could have been from the tribe of Ammon, now which I think is really interesting. Or it's possible that he could be from the Jewish tribe, because many people believe that he was Jewish, that Columbus was Jewish. It's hard to know, but he was sailing from Portugal. That's really significant because, and I'm going to tell you why in just a minute here. So now the Moriscos, which is what they were called, they were Spanish Muslims. They either had to convert to Christianity, and some of them did. They become Catholic. So that's one of the reasons why you see so many Catholic in South America. Do y'all understand why? Because many of these people converted to the Catholic Church, or they'd have to leave. So, and it's interesting because in that time frame, many of them still wanted to stay Muslim, but they kept a lot of that secret. Now, it says they often hid their identities, serving in a role of translators to officials, but faced suspicion and persecution from the Spanish authorities because they feared that they were disloyal. All right, so here is the evidence. This Catherine Cook, she wrote a book, and in that book, she went through and traced all the Inquisition documents and showed that how many of the people that were from Portugal and the lower part of Spain that were Muslims, that were from these tribes, they came to South America and they came to Mexico. And that's, her book covers that. And she actually took the documents, she showed them in her book. And it's interesting. It says they came in and they blended in and they tried to stay, under the radar because they didn't want anybody to know that they were Muslims, and because they had been persecuted by the Inquisition too. So it wasn't just the Jews that got persecuted. It would have been Christians that were there also, and it would have been the Muslims. Now, this is the history. Now, this is the significant part right here. The DNA shows that the North African Moors are the ancestors of many Spaniards. So they had moved into that area. They had been there for like 700 or 800 years. So they would have mixed with the people there. Do y'all understand? They would have mixed with the people there. And that's why their DNA shows up. It says their DNA is Moors. So that's real significant because that's really telling you that these tribes, Moab and Ammon, were the tribes that were settled in the bottom, and they were the people that came over into Mexico, and they came into South America. Now, I'm going to show you this. Now, this is where the Moabites would have been. Here's Ammon down here. Over here, there's the Moabites. And here's Judah over here in this area. So they would have been a little lower. Do y'all see that they're just below Judah? They're below Israel is what they are. They're below Israel, but they're right down here. Do y'all see that?
Thank you.
So you notice that she's down here. Moab is down here. But notice when they came into, you know that the Spanish came in and they settled in Florida. They didn't settle all the way down here in Florida. They settled in this area right here. Okay. All right. So this would have been Judah right here. That would have been the southern states. So if I can get my mouse to cooperate, this would have been Judah. And notice how to the side of that would have been Moab. That would have been the people that I'm talking about, which are the Spanish that came in. In fact, that's why they brought in the Highlanders, which we know were Jews, out of the top of Scotland. The reason that we know that they're Jews is they came in and they actually settled in that area they came in from Ireland and settled in that Highlander area. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that they came in for the sure purpose of keeping the Spanish out of the 13 colonies. That's what they were hired to do. That's why they came. So the people that settled Georgia, and they settled these areas in Alabama and Mississippi, many of those were of that Scottish descent. And they would have been the tribe of Judah. I don't have time to prove that right now, but we have covered that on many other programs. But do y'all see that they're to the side, just exactly the way they were in the land of Israel? It's really fascinating to me, just fascinating to me. They always stayed close to Israel. They always did. They did that because they were always close to Abraham. And now when they came in, they mixed with the people that were in the land, because they came in as white people. If you look at the pictures of the Moors and the Spanish during that time, you can see their features. They were white people. But when they came into Mexico and they came into South America, they began to mix with the people. So that's why their color, they have darker colored skin now, because they mixed in with the Indians that had come across the land bridge, because the Indians came across the land bridge and came down into South America. Yes, somebody want to talk? So now notice this. Here's America. Y'all can see America there. But look how South America is really to the side, just like in the land of Israel. I mean, they're to the side. Do y'all see that they're to the side? It's amazing how the Father continues to do the same things over and over again. All right, now, we talked about this. Abraham, very interesting, allowed Lot to pick his land first. So Spain and Portugal, which is where the Moors lived, that's where the Moab and Ammon were saying that they live. I feel like they did. I think there's enough history there to back that up, that they picked the land first too. God allowed them to come in and pick the land. And they went into San Salvador, you remember that, and they settled in Mexico because they were looking for gold, but then they would eventually go into Florida. And so it's interesting that God allowed them to pick the land first again. I mean, that's just amazing, but that's what they did. Now, I want to talk about the immigration that's going on, because we know many of those people in Mexico and South America have come into this land. And so now I'm going to play a video for y'all.
This hapless government, and it's corrupt, and they're kind of glad for mass migration because now they don't have to feed their own people. The reality is, in their own words, they view immigration very differently. Glenn, this is from a government report. This is a report written by one of President Sheinbaum's top aides in December of 2024. It says,
okay, hang on just a sec. Sheinbaum, in case you don't know, is the president of Mexico. This is 2024, president of Mexico. Go ahead.
Yeah. We already know that the Mexican population in the United States reaches 39.9 million. We Mexicans are reclaiming our territory. That's from December of 2024. Here's a powerful senator who's also a member of the Morena Party, who sits on the National Defense Committee, which is the most powerful committee in the Mexican Senate. Quote, we Mexicans are in our territories: California, Nevada, Texas, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Wyoming. We're going to take back the territory that was stolen from us. And, you know, Glenn, you hear these quotes and you think, okay, well, maybe this is just bravado. But as I point out in the book, they have actually created a network and infrastructure inside the United States. And this infrastructure, this includes Mexican government officials inside the United States who are organizing violent protests like those that hit Los Angeles, those that are in Minneapolis. And they are actively participating in our politics. They are working to elect Democrats who are sympathetic, a foreign government, to elect Democrats who are sympathetic to them on immigration and working to defeat President Trump through Mexican consulates that are across the United States.
This is so clear. Your sources are so clear. Why don't we know about any of this until now?
I think it's a couple of things. I think, first of all, Mexico has a reputation for being kind of a sleepy, corrupt government, and people don't take them seriously. I think we should. Mexico, think about this for a second, Glenn. Mexico has 53 consulates in the United States. 53. In contrast, the two other countries with the most are China and the United Kingdom with 6 and 7. So they have this vast network in the United States. And I think that, they have masked what they're doing quite effectively.
The people in Mexico and South America have come into the United States. There's 40 million of them. And they really look, and I don't know if I have that video or not, they really look at this as their land. They consider it their land. They think that we stole it from them. And so they've come in and they've infiltrated the United States, and we don't even know that it's going on. And they are part of some of these demonstrations and riots and the things that are being planned in this country. And it's happened before in history. And we're going to talk about how it happened with Israel in history. So this is the story. This is from Judges chapter 6 to chapter 8. And this is the story of Gideon. Now, y'all know the story of Gideon. And so he did not, in the beginning, he did not trust God. And he had to have proof because God told him, yes, I'm going to take you in and you're going to take down the Midianites. And he told him, he said, well, I don't know that you're going to really do that. So if you're going to really do that, put dew on the mat. And then he says, now, I still don't believe you. So the next morning, do no dew on the mat. And so he was trying to convince Gideon, because he wanted to use Gideon to lead an army, a small army of only 300 men against the Midianites. So it's really interesting because I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to read the scriptures about the Midianites. But notice here that even after he won the war, notice this is so important. He went in and he destroyed Baal's altars, but then when he came back and he refused to be king, and he put up an idol. So he was still worshiping idols. Do y'all? I mean, it just kind of hit me real hard when I saw that he was still worshiping an idol, because here's somebody God used in such a powerful way. I mean, so God chooses who he wants. I mean, he obviously has chosen Trump to do quite a bit of things. And I wouldn't consider Trump a true righteous man. I mean, I think he's doing righteous works, yes. But I mean, I don't really think he has a relationship with God in the same way that we do, right? But let's get into this story because...
Hey, Linda. The same can be said about Jacob and Rachel. I mean, his wife had all these idols that she brought with her, stole them from her father, and then she deceived her father while she sat on the saddle when she hid the idols in them, because Jacob didn't believe that they had idols. And it wasn't until much later when Jacob had them get rid of all their idols.
Yes, I mean, he found out that she had done it. And so what was he going to do? Because he said the person that did this is going to die. And so, and she went, she did wind up dying at the birth of Benjamin, but
Benjamin, yeah.
It may be that when he said that God may have required her life. I don't know the answer there, but I mean, I just think that's interesting. But so here we are, and listen to this story, because this sounds exactly like America. It sounds exactly like America. All right, so the hand of the Midians prevailed against Israel, because the Midians of the children of Israel had made them dens which were in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. So they came into the land. It's what he's saying. And so was when Israel had sown, that the Midianites came up, and the Amalekites and the children of the east, even they came in against them. So it wasn't just the Midianites. You see, it was the Amalekites, which would have been Esau, okay, and the children of the east. So who just came across our border when we had all this immigration problem? Who just came across our border? Is it not the same people? The people of the east came in here. We know that. We know that the people from South America and Moab were coming in here, but they talked a lot about how terrorists were coming across our border. Do y'all remember that? This is exactly what happened to Israel. All these, they called it the battle between the Midianites, but it really was not just the Midianites. Yes.
Yeah, I said the Chinese came in and all sorts of people from Africa and everybody from the East.
Yes. See, children of the East came against them. So it says, and they camped against them and destroyed the increase of the earth. Now, interesting. Now watch what they're being called. Judges verse 5, and they came with their cattle and their tents, and they came as grasshoppers for a multitude, for both of them and their camels were without number. It was a huge amount of people. So they're saying that they came in as an invasion, and they were a huge amount of people. So here's Gideon going up against them with only 300 men. So no wonder he was nervous, but God, he does not use numbers. Numbers are not important to him. That's why when David decided to number Israel, it made the father so mad. He got so mad because it's not about numbers with him. He can work with a small group of people. He really can. And that's what he's been showing. And it's the same story. You'll see the same story play out in history many times. Do y'all remember the story about the 300 that were in Athens and the area of Greece, and the Persians came in? Remember that? They even did a movie about that. The Spartans. Yeah, y'all remember that movie?
Yeah, it was that Thermopylae.
Yeah. So I mean that was Israelites. That was Israelites, and they had 300 men that were Spartans. They call it. There's another movie called The 300. And it was the same story, but they're calling them the grasshoppers. Do y'all see that? I think that's interesting because they use the word grasshoppers in prophecy all the time, and it's one of the meanings of that is immigrants. And it says this large number, and we had we think we had 20 million people come in during that time that Biden was president, that there was at least 20 million people rolled in that were illegals. It's the same identical scenario. Do y'all see that it's the same identical scenario? I just think it's so fascinating because we read these things and Israel's already gone through this. And so what happened with Israel is they were impoverished and they suffered because all the immigrants that came in, because now they don't have the services and they don't have the manpower to deal with so many people. And so now look at the statistics here. This is the data from 2022, 2023, and it says the immigrants' households use welfare at least higher rate than U.S.-born households overall, estimating the range between 51 to 54% of immigrants are using benefits compared to 39 of the native-born. So you're talking about over half of the people that are of the Latino descent are using welfare. All right, now then there's some more statistics. If they have, now this is what I asked AI. And I said, if they have more than 3 children, how many of those percentages are using welfare? And it says 51 to 76% of the households have at least one major welfare program, and that increases with children. So you're looking at way over 50% if they have more than 3 children. if they have at least 3 children or more. Well, you know, many of the people that are Latino descent, they have a lot of children, 40 to 45. He talks about how Ammon and Moab, many nations will be taken down, he says, but they won't be totally taken down. So let's see what the scripture says about them. So at the shaking of the heavens and when the earth has been moved, that's the earthquake. When the Father's fierce anger comes, he's telling you at that time, which is really the time that we are at war. It says this. It says, Isaiah chapter 13, verse 14, and it shall be as a chase roe, which is a deer, as a sheep, that no man take it up, that every man will turn to his own people and flee out of the land. So all the foreigners, when this war starts and when the earthquake happens, they're all going to flee out of the land. Well, there's only one place to flee out, because a lot of I believe that this war will push in from the north through Canada. It'll be an easy way to come in. To bring in, they have to bring in a lot of their equipment, right? And they've already got a station up in the north part of the Arctic area. That's why Trump wants Greenland. That's why he wants it. He wants to keep them out of that area. That's what he wants to do, because I'm sure they're stockpiling, and he knows that. They're probably stockpiling weapons and stuff in that area. So if they come in from the north, and scripture talks about how they come into the middle of the country. So when they do that, these immigrants are going to come out. They're going to come out. And there's only one way to come out, and that's through that southern border. Now, let's go on here. Now listen to what he tells them. Listen to what he tells Moab. He said, let my outcast dwell with the Moab, and be now convert to their face of the spoiler. All right, so when our people, they are going to start leaving out of the country also, and there's only, like I said, the best way to go out is through the southern border. And, you know, maybe some of the people in the top part of the United States may flee out through Canada, but most of them are going to flee out through the bottom, which is going to be Mexico. Okay, so it says, when my outcasts come to dwell with you, Moab, when they come to dwell with you, when they go into Mexico, you know, from the face of the spoiler, it says, the extortions are at an end and the spoiling has ceased. The oppression is consumed out of the oppressors are consumed out of the land. So he's telling you that at this point, the people that are actually in the United States that are immigrants, they're going to be they're called the oppressors. They're going to come out of the land. And then says that he's telling Moab, take care of my people when they come into Mexico. And that's so unbelievable. That right there shows where Moab is. I mean, that just shows where Moab is. I just can't get over it. All right, so now they are going to be destroyed, and I'm going to cover how they're destroyed and why they're destroyed. And then it's the same story with Ammon. I just didn't put in all the verses for Ammon. So Jeremiah 48, verse 9, give wings unto Moab that he will flee and get away from the cities, therefore shall be desolate without any to dwell therein. And Isaiah 11, verse 14, and they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines. That just represents the Gentiles toward the west. So this is talking about our people, because Isaiah 11:11 talks about how I'm going to gather all the immigrants out of all the lands that they have been sent to. Remember that verse? I'm going to gather all the people. And then it says they are going to flee where? Are they fleeing to the Middle East, Israel? Is that where they're fleeing? Where are they fleeing to? They're fleeing to the west, and they will spoil the east together. So they're right after they get released, then there's going to be a massive war where they go in and they take the goods and services that have already been taken from them. They're going to take back what has been taken from them, and they're going to bring it, and they're going to go toward the west. It says, and they spoil in the east, and they shall lay their hands upon Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall obey them. So this is some of the people that they're going to destroy when they set up this when they have this war. Okay, now let me go on with it. So Moab is spoiled and gone out of his cities, and the chosen young men have gone down for the slaughter. And Jeremiah 48 verse 47, and I will bring again the captivity of Moab in the latter days. Do y'all see that? So this looks like the event that after the Messiah returns, okay, then Israel will be gathered together and they'll be able to go back to their homes, which is what Jeremiah 31 talks about. They'll get to go back to their homes. But before they do that, they will spoil these nations. They will take back what was theirs. It's like the repeat of the Exodus, because in the Exodus, they spoiled Egypt. Do y'all remember that? And somebody tell me who Egypt is in prophecy, because we talked about that last week. Anybody want to tell me?
I think you said Israel. I don't know.
Yeah, it is Israel. It is the world ruling government. That's what it is.
Okay.
Yes, great. Because, remember that it tells you that the place where the Messiah is crucified is called Egypt. Well, the place that the Messiah was crucified was Jerusalem. So she's called Egypt. She'll be that world ruling government. And so it's very easy to see this, but it says in the last days, they're going to go into captivity because they did this to their brother. So we're going to talk about that. And it'll probably happen in the night. See, here's Isaiah 15, verse 1, the burden of Moab, because in the night, which is the winter, Moab is laid waste and brought to silence. Okay, so going on, Jeremiah 48, verse 28, oh, you that dwell in Moab, leave the cities and dwell in the rocks, so go hide. And for the spoiler of Moab shall come upon thee, and he shall destroy thy strongholds. All right, and then Moab is confounded, and which is broken down, and she howls and cries. Moab is spoiled. So they're going to go in and take back what has been stolen from them. That's what I'm trying to tell you. All right, Isaiah 16, verse 12, it shall come to pass when you have seen that Moab is weary from the high places. He came to his sanctuary to pray, but he was not prevailed. He came to his sanctuary to pray, you see, because he knows he's in dire straits now. So this is talking about his Catholic faith. This is talking about his Catholic faith here. And in verse 14, and the Lord has spoken it to say, within 3 years of the hireling, the glory of Moab shall be condemned, and the great multitude and the remnant shall be very small and feeble. So they're going to reduce the numbers of Moab to a very small amount. Now, this is the same story with Ammon, the same verses. So the question is why? So why is Moab and Ammon, why is the Father so upset with them? And let's go through the reasons. And so Jeremiah 48, verse 11, Moab has been at least from her youth and has settled in his leaks. All right, and that means he's been lazy. That talks about how he's been lazy. He doesn't really, as a nation, he doesn't really work and prosper like he could do it. And he's more of a merchant going on. And Jeremiah 48, verse 29, I'm sorry. And I've heard the pride of Moab, and he is exceedingly proud and lofty and arrogant with his pride and haughty in his horn. So these are the reasons why the Father is going to punish him. And joy and gladness from the pleasant fields and from the land of Moab, I've caused wine to fail from the wine presses. Now that is referring to, it's not just wine. That is referring to the drug industry. God's going to put a halt to it. You see, that's the intoxication of something that's a substance, which is what a lot of the cartel, many of those, we know what they're doing, pushing the drugs and everything else. But see, because of their corruption, the Father's going to punish them just like he punishes us. But they don't get their punishment until after the Messiah returns. Not their major punishment. It may be that somebody goes in there but it's not the major takedown for Moab won't happen until the Messiah returns. And he's ye him drunken for the magnitude himself against the Lord. So he's talking about how he has this issue with alcohol, and really we're talking about drugs here. Okay, and he's selling them. And I will cause to cease in Moab, said the Lord, him that has offered up the high places, to him that has burnt incense to his gods. That is the Catholic Church. So can you, as I read these verses, can you not see that this is talking about Mexico and South America, which is almost completely Catholic? They
Hey,
offer
Linda?
up their incenses to gods. Yes.
Anytime, if my background is Catholic and people go into the Catholic Church, you pay a price to light candles in the church.
I didn't know you had to pay.
Oh yeah, you do. You have to pay. I remember when we had to go, we had to pay you. At one time, I don't think you did, but I think they do charge you now depending upon the candles you light.
They do.
Yeah, I thought so, Bev.
Wow. You wouldn't think it. You just wouldn't think it. But see, that's what he's talking about here. He's going to go to his church and he's going to pray to the idols. You see, and so during that time, because he's not going to convert. And so that's why it's going to be a small number, a feeble bunch. They're going to be feeble and a small, and we're just telling you the reasons why. But this is not all the reasons. So y'all remember the story of Balaam, and you know that the king of Moab asked Balaam to curse Israel. And he said, you don't even have to curse Israel. All you have to do is go put the pretty girls down next to the camp. The men in Israel will marry into them. And, they'll bring in the idols that way. And that's what's Balaam's answer. Remember? He said, I can't curse Israel. God's not going to let me do that. So they hated their brother. And so this is what we're talking about here. So let's go in Jeremiah 48, verse 42. And Moab shall be destroyed from being a people because he has magnified himself against the Lord. See, so because of his sins is why this is going to be brought on him. They have despised evil against it and come and let us cut it off from being a nation. So it won't be a big nation anymore. We just mentioned it's going to be a small, little, feeble group. That shall be also cut off, O man, the sword shall pursue thee. And thus said the Lord, because Moab and Seir, here's Edom right here, do say, behold, the house of Judah is like unto the heathen. Now remember that there is also tribes of Moab and Ammon in the Middle East right now. There's a remnant of them there now, is what I've been told. So I've never checked their ancestry, but I do know that there were still people left in the Middle East. And so you have both places. You have them in the Middle East. Those may be, they may go to war when Trump or whoever goes in there to take down the Middle East. When that happens, some of them will be impacted. Chances are be all right. So it says, behold, the house of Judah is like unto a heathen. So they hated Israel. They hated Israel. And, and Abraham was always so good to them, but they hated Israel. And so this is why when we get to Deuteronomy 23, which I didn't put in there, but I could go to it, it says that the Moabites and the Ammonites will not be allowed into the congregation of Israel because of their hatred toward them. They hate them, and so that's why they're not going to be allowed in. All right, so God's going to not destroy them totally, but he's going to punish them severely for their sin. Now, I'm going to play in one more video for y'all.
Use of nuclear weapons against Europe, not against Kiev, against Europe, specifically the UK and Germany. Just taking out the UK and Germany with nuclear weapons. That's a fact. Now, we're going to explain why we know that that's true in a moment. And at the end of this open, we're going to play an interview we did a few hours ago with a man called Sergei Karnagov, who is a longtime political advisor to Vladimir Putin and one of the most famous public intellectuals in Russia, been around for about 35 years, advised Boris Yeltsin 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. And in that interview, he says point blank, yes, if the Ukraine war continues at this tempo for a year or two more, we, speaking apparently on behalf of the Russian government, on behalf of his friend Putin, or at least someone who's very familiar with President Putin's thinking, we, Russia, will eliminate the UK and Germany with nuclear weapons. Now,
Why?
that's a headline. No one wants to see Qatari gas wellheads blown up. No one wants to see killing of any kind or destruction of any kind. But taking out the two most important countries in Europe, both of which have big American bases, lots of American personnel, of course, international banking, Germany being the economic engine of Europe, London being the banking center of Europe, of the West, along with New York. And of course, these are two ancient countries with which we have close ties, history and kinship and genetics. We're going to take them out. We're going to eliminate those countries with nuclear weapons, saying that right into camera. So that's a pretty big story. Have you read that story? Has anyone mentioned that to you?
No.
Famous public intellectual in Russia, a close friend of Vladimir Putin's, exactly the same age. The two were born a month apart, have known each other a long time. He's saying in public that Russia plans to use nuclear weapons against Western Europe. Russia is going to blow up the UK and Germany if things don't get resolved soon. You probably haven't heard that. It hasn't actually been on the front page of the New York Times.
Punished in the physical way. Though I am starting to say that these idiots do not understand anything but physical pain. And that's sooner or later we have to go after the escalation. And if they do not stop this senseless war and hostility in and around Ukraine, then we would have to start to attack Europe with conventional weapons. And then next step will be waves of nuclear. Using nuclear weapons, any weapon is a sin. But using nuclear weapons is a double sin. And I don't want to be Russia to be that big a sinner. We have all our sins. But if needed, we have to eliminate the European threat to humanity.
How far are we from Russia using nuclear weapons against Europe?
2 years. Now, if this do, it is not. I'm not calling for regime change, but if Europeans do not change these elites for more national-oriented, for more responsible, they are doomed. And
if there were nuclear strikes from Russia into Europe in the next year or two, as you said there may be, what countries would that include?
They understand that they are playing with fire and they're trying to retreat from the front lines of this conflict. But my choice would be Britain and Germany.
You'd take out Britain and Germany with nuclear weapons.
I beg our Almighty that it wouldn't happen.
Yes.
But Germany should be the first, because Germany is the source of the worst in the European history.
All right, so what he's saying here is real important, because he said within a year or possibly 2 years that he's going to take out Britain and Germany. Okay, now the reason that's really important is because the Father cannot allow that to happen. He can't allow two whole nations of Israel to be destroyed. Do y'all understand scripturally? And I'm going to show you the verses, okay? Let's go here first. And this is Matthew 24, verse 22. Except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved. For the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. Now, we read that and we said, well, because if it wasn't for the Father returning, the whole place is going to go up in smoke, because we can just see where things are headed right now. And so the Father knows that. So he knows Russia is not fooling around, that they have every intention of attacking Europe. That's what we're talking about here. So the Father can't have that done, and I'm going to prove it to you from Scripture. he's saying if I don't come now, and shorten the time, then there's not going to be any Israel left either. You see, that's what he's saying. So let's look at these verses. Now, Jeremiah 31:35, thus said the Lord, who gives the sun for the light and the day, and the ordinances for the moon, and the stars for the light in the night, which divides the sea from the waves that roar. And the Lord is the host is his name. Now, look at this, Jeremiah 31:36. If those ordinances, which is the moon, depart before me, because he just called the ordinance of the moon. Do y'all see that? If the ordinances of the moon depart from before me, said the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me. Now, I think that's really interesting, because what he's saying, if you can look up in the sky and you can still see the moon, that's my promise to you that I will not let Israel be destroyed. And he's not talking about just because he talks about at the end time that all 12 tribes are going to be there. That's talked about in Genesis 49. So he's really saying that he not allow someone to go in and take out two whole nations of Israel. He won't allow that according to these verses here. Do y'all see that? That's a promise as long as we see the moon. Now, there's going to be times it talks about in the book of Revelations where the moon is partially blocked and dark, but it's not destroyed, and not that you can't see it. We're not talking about eclipses here, right? We're talking about, the moon being taken out. And he says, as long as you can see the moon, I promise you that Israel will never cease from being a nation. That's what he said. But he's also saying that he sees where the time is right now. So that's how we know we're so close. We're so close because we can see the timing now. Now, I'm going to play in one more video for y'all. It's all right, this one right here, which I just could not believe when I heard this. And y'all may not have heard this one. Okay.
Actually, with the idea that white self-awareness is effectively illegal in the United States, whereas
I'm going to stop there self-awareness. Just a second. What he's really saying is that the immigrants that come in here, they talk about their nationalities. They talk about they bring in their own flag. They are self-identifying, and they know their history. They know all about their nation for the most part, right? And they bring their values into this country. And we are people that have a lot of mixed values. We know that that's part of the problem. But he's saying that that's not allowed with the white people. That's not, and let's just hear him say.
And every other group is encouraged. Like, doesn't make any sense. Speak for myself, I'd rather live in a deracialized world where people think about it less, because it does cause problems. But as long as you're encouraging identity politics, why do whites not get to have it? What is the answer?
Well, it's completely hypocritical. It's because the people running the society are anti-white. And they've been able to persuade or intimidate the entire legal system to operate in an anti-white way. Anti-white in this case really means anti-American. Because the whites are Americans. That's who Americans are. The people who signed the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, I did know that. And the purpose of the project, like big picture, again, I keep going back to this, but I am a little bit confused, because this is the defining fact of our lives, is that whites around the world are being eliminated. And I would like to know why. Do you have any guesses?
As I say, I think, Doctor, I think it derives from emotion rather than a kind of rational calculation. I mean, if you look at what's happened in South Africa, or for that matter, in every big American black city that's majority black, I mean, they can't want it to be to get into a situation where the water is putrid and nothing works and all that kind of thing. But they do. So the purpose of the system is what it does, and
that's right.
And the purpose of non-white government is to produce non-white government and non-white results. Unless, of course, you're Chinese. I mean, because Singapore's run Japanese. Singapore, they're run very efficiently.
They are. It's just interesting that people move here because it's a white country, and we
See to right into the ground, yes.
Well, all of us benefit, white and non-white benefit alike from systems created by whites because they're more humane, they're more just, they're more fair, and they're much more efficient and cleaner, obviously.
Okay, so I'm moving back here because I want to talk about what he just said. And see, what he's saying is all these immigrants want to come to the place where the white people are. Well, they think it's because of our lifestyle, and it's partly because of our lifestyle, but it's truly because of the blessings of Abraham. The reason that they want to come here is because the white nations are Israel, and they have been blessed. And they're not blessed because of anything they did. They're blessed because it was a promise made to Abraham. But see, these guys have no clue. They have no clue. Yeah, okay. All right, so understand why they're having this conversation is that, everybody can talk about their own nationalities in this country, but the Americans and the white people, they're not allowed to. And he mentions how is it that they're always trying to destroy the white people in all these nations? And they are, because this goes back to the fact that they hate Israel. And, you can see this history all the way through from the beginning of Israel, that when she came on board, that there was a hatred. But the whole point is they think it's because of the things that they've done, and it is partially from the things that they've done because they're very hardworking people. But the real answer to that is the fact that Abraham was promised his descendants would have these blessings. And that's the real rub right there. That's the real thing. So, that's where I'm going to stop right here but I just couldn't pass up that discussion because, yeah, we do see that the white people are not treated the same in their own country. It's just, anybody want to make some comments?
I do. This is Terry. Good
Hey,
morning.
Terry.
I thought of two things, actually three. One's a little story, if I could take a minute.
You can
But
take as long as you want.
Yeshua said I think one of the things as they discuss this, and this is like so broad, widespread in the church, that we have not recognized who we are. When Yeshua said they hated me and they're going to hate you, I think it's been so easy for us that we haven't really seen it, or because we're still comfortable in our life and we haven't really experienced that until now. We're starting to see this reverse discrimination in our country where it's if you say you're white, you're prejudicial. If you say you're proud of your whiteness, you're prejudicial. But even though everyone else can do that, like they point out. The other one is way back in the garden, Father said he would put enmity between the two seeds. And I think that's another part of maybe the deepest part of the whole story is there's been this enmity from the garden. And we have also not recognized, like you do so well, Linda, is pointing out the seed line and who we really are. And then the last is this, I watched this pastor, very, very black man in New York City called Dr. David Manning. Maybe some of you have heard him. When Obama was elected, I watched his sermon after the election, and he was furious with his congregation because he told them that that they voted for a man based on his skin color, and he was just furious that they had elected Obama. And then he told stories. He told this amazing history lesson about the black man coming out of Africa, and basically he said, "You've never accomplished one thing without the white man." He said, "You go back to Africa where you came from, and you'll still see that all they're doing is murdering each other, and they can't accomplish anything." And he said that We've put in tens of millions of dollars. Our very large congregation that his ministry, we've put in tens of millions of dollars in ministry in the Bronx. And he pointed out that not one thing has changed. We're still just killing each other, killing whites, and we can't accomplish anything. He said, you can't even build a 2-story house without a white man. It was an amazing speech. And I was like, wow, first time I ever heard a black man, talk about truthful things like this. It was very amazing.
Yeah. So this goes back to, it's not the white people themselves, I don't believe. I think it's because it's the blessings Abraham was given.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think,
so true.
We wanted so much to claim it because we have so much pride. We want to claim it that, because we're white and because we're, the white race, then that makes us superior to all the other countries because we've been real successful, right? We've been successful. That's easy to see that the white nations have been prosperous and successful, but
Yes.
it didn't come at their hands because look at the Chinese, look at some of the other people that have worked much harder, but have not been as prosperous. They've not been as prosperous. And there's hardly anybody that works harder than the Chinese and the Oriental people. They work very hard, but they don't have the blessings. They don't have the blessings. We have been given these blessings by God. It's not something we did. I think that it's so important for people to understand that concept, even in your own spiritual life. You can't take credit for the things that you do. I don't believe you should, because I think that all the things that you do are because the Father inspires you to do them. That's where I am on that, and so it really makes my blood boil a little, and I try very hard in my own life not to take credit for anything because I don't think that it's me doing any work. I really think it's the Father in me that does that work.
Yeah.
And so it's a very important concept. We don't want to leave the Father out of the work that we do. And here's the other piece of this that, I couldn't believe when I saw that story of the Midianites because it's identical to what we have just been going through. Identical. All those people come across the border. That happened in Israel. All those people come across the border. So God used Gideon with 300 men. So that had to be a real humbling thing for him to do, because he was already a warrior. Now, remember, if you read the account of Gideon, he actually talked to God face to face because it says that God turned his face and looked at him. It says the Lord turned his face and looked at him. So he was talking to him face to face. And that has happened many times in Scripture. And we just don't think that is even possible. We don't think it's possible. He went and talked to Abraham. He sat down and had a meal with Abraham. So I don't think it's far-fetched when this country, all these people are taken out of this land and he leaves his people, he calls his holy seed here. I wouldn't think when he says, I'm going to talk to you face to face, I think it's a very strong possibility that he does exactly that. Because that's what he says in Ezekiel 20. I'm going to talk to him face to face. And so it's interesting because we can't even go there. We can't even think in those terms because we think of these stories as something far-fetched in the past. We think they're nice little stories, yes, but we can't see ourselves doing the same thing, if that makes any sense. Anybody want to talk?
Yeah, totally makes sense. I hate to hog the time
No,
with you.
Please,
No,
I want
I think
people
that's
to talk. So
yeah, that totally makes sense. And also, like, I think the inference was that it wasn't the white man so much as it was his relationship to the Creator.
yes,
The white man walked with the Word of God, and they were really the only people who were doing that. And they were the people who were sharing the Word of God among the nations. And then the nations sort of wanted to be like that, as you've talked about, like the Constitution and the way the Republic ran, that it changed the world at that time. But it was really about the Father, his Spirit, and his Word, and not so much the white man, because it was Father who chose the guy in the first place. And I think that was probably a part of what Pastor Manning was trying to say. As a black man, they had the blessings of the white man because of the spiritual relationship with the Heavenly Father.
Yes. So, it's interesting, really interesting about Columbus, because Columbus was a believer, but they've discredited him. So he just looks like an evil person. But he actually wrote books on prophecy. Do y'all know that Columbus wrote books on prophecy? He did, and he prophesied about the founding of this nation. And so interesting, because it was 282 years from the time of Columbus to the time that the American Revolution started. 282 years. And the Jewish teachers tell us that they believe that it was 282 years from the time of Jeroboam, to the time of Josiah. So I think that's really interesting, because do y'all know that the very first person who died in the American Revolution was called Josiah? The very first person. And that would have been 282 years. So Columbus at that time, there was a prophet that came to Jeroboam, and he said, there's going to be a man named Josiah, and he's going to take the bones of all of your prophets and your high priest, and he's going to burn them on the altar. And he's going to tear down all of your pagan temples and all your idol worship. And that's what Josiah did. If you remember, he took all the bones of the high priest and all the ones that worked in the temple, and he burned those bones. And it was God considered that a sacrifice of those people. And so interesting. I just think it's so interesting because it's the same identical parallel. So we discredit Columbus. He may have been from the tribe of Moab and Ammon. I don't know that, but I know the people from Portugal would have been from those tribes of Ammon and Moab. Yes, somebody wanted to talk. Yes.
So they found a journal of Columbus, and in his journal, he talked about this burning desire he had within, like the Holy Spirit leading him, like he had this true burning desire. And a lot of stuff that has been written about Columbus is just really not true. If you read some of his journals, he actually befriended some of the Indians and tried to take care of them. It was some of his men that he had that didn't like him. I mean, it's just really, truly amazing how they have maligned this whole historical stuff about Columbus, I mean.
Yes, they have, and tried to destroy his image the best that they knew how. But I really think he was a converted man. Maybe not to the same. There's different levels, okay. But I just think that I think that he was writing prophecies and some of them would be fulfilled. Just like there was a prophet that appeared before Jeroboam, there was a prophet in our land too, which was Columbus. But we don't see any of that. We don't see the fact that it looked like an exodus when this country was set up. And everything that had to do with the exodus was fulfilled right here. I mean, we could go through that at some point so people could see that. I think we'll probably have to do that soon because I've been studying the founders for a while now.